The double-crested cormorant is perhaps the most maligned bird in Ontario, and honestly, I'm not sure why.
But this is nothing new for the cormorant.
There's been this pervasive dogma against these animals throughout most of history, often being associated with bad omens, death, gluttony, and even being considered messengers of the dead. It looks like there's nothing new. In 2020, the MNRF decided to lift the protection for the cormorant, allowing a bag limit of up to 15 birds per day during the open season. Most surprisingly of all, this decision was made based off of public opinion, not scientific research, leaving many in the scientific community to believe that the cormorant is being used as a scapegoat, allowing private interests to continue their ecosystem damaging work. That's enough speculation. Let's focus on what we know, and hopefully dispel a few myths about these emerald-eyed beauties. Perhaps the most pervasive myth, and quite possibly the most dangerous, is that the cormorant is the reason for the decreasing sport fishing population.
However, there is evidence of this being completely untrue.
In fact, a study out of Hamilton, Ontario found that round goby and alewives make a majority of the cormorant diet, not sportfish. Both of these fish species are in fact invasive and are causing a categorical threat to the sport fishing population as they eat countless eggs every year, meaning that the cormorant's eating habit might actually be helping preserve the sport fishing population, not damaging it. And it's not just Hamilton that's reporting this. There's been several studies throughout the Great Lakes reporting similar findings. All of this points towards the cormorant actually playing a vital role in the ecosystem. And honestly, that's no surprise, as cormorants are actually native to Ontario, and by many are considered to be a conservation success story.
Now, this may be contrary to what you have heard,
as it's a commonly held belief that the double-crested cormorant is an invasive species and its recent population growth is completely out of control. This kind of makes sense because many people are in the unique position of growing up without the cormorant being a major part of its ecosystem. The cormorant population has been decreasing for many, many years, but nothing has been as fatal to the population as the pervasive use of pesticides in the 20th centuries. In fact, in the 1980s, the number of nesting pairs in the Great Lakes were as little as 125, which is a far cry from the 12,000 nesting pairs that there are currently. Let's just say these birds came back exponentially. A study of the population of cormorants in the Georgian Bay found that in the 1990s, the cormorant population grew 11.7% year over year on average. And this rightfully raised some concern about the cormorant population possibly growing out of control. However, these concerns were soon mitigated as the population began to reach a natural plateau. The exact same report goes on to say that in the early 2000s, the cormorant population growth became stagnant, even decreasing in certain years. This has later been attributed to something called nest density, where the nesting areas that the cormorants occupy only allow for a certain number of nests, thus creating a form of equilibrium in the local ecosystem. While some argue that they are actually damaging terrestrial habitats with their nesting habits and acidic excrement, many have begun to view this as a form of renaturalization and likely plays a vital role in the ecosystem. And listen, many of these studies revolve around specific regions of the Great Lakes, and the data that's collected might not reflect every single region of Ontario. However, that's also kind of the point. Why are we implementing this large-scale rubber stamp method to dealing with the cormorant population, particularly when the data that's available to us is contrary to public belief?
Which leads to our final myth that this open season doesn't have the possibility of completely annihilating the cormorant population in Ontario.
With the recent cormorant population only having recently reached its natural plateau, it's hard to imagine how this 15 bag count per day isn't going to be catastrophic. In fact, the OFAH might be able to help us put this bag count into perspective, as they said the following when they were trying to justify a 50 bag count per day. And they had the following to say: there's a difference between theory and reality. In reality, it would cost approximately $11,000 in ammunition alone to shoot this many birds. Then they go on to say, this doesn't even consider the time and effort that it would take to locate and shoot 50 birds for this many consecutive days. I'm glad they know the difference between theory and reality, because it's the exact same distinction that I would use to describe a bag limit that exceeds the amount the average hunter can achieve and an unlimited kill count designed to eradicate a species. We can particularly question this approach to population management when there's already been a proven method to address the cormorant population in specific regions of Ontario. through the use of egg oiling.
Egg oiling is the process of coating the egg in a thin layer of oil, preventing the egg from ever hatching. This process has actively been used in other regions of the Great Lakes effectively.
This methodology in particular allows us to address this issue regionally so that we can address specific areas where the cormorant's been proven to be a problem. In reality, these birds have been here long before us. They're not damaging the ecosystem, they're a natural part of the ecosystem. However, people believe what they see, and it's much easier to blame the bird we see soaring across the skies every single day than the things we can't ourselves perceive, such as the effects of commercial fishing or the invasive zebra mussels, all of which I'll be addressing in a future video. So maybe